Welcome back everyone. In this tutorial we are going to learn about SQL constraints. When we need to create a table and the columns inside any table, we need to pay attention to the constraints that we need to add to each column. So, what is the meaning of constraints in SQL? Constraints are used to specify rules for the data in a table. So constraints are used to limit the type of data that can go into a table. So we can understand from this that constraints are objects or something are objects in SQL in a table that can be created to enforce a certain business rules. And based on that we can see the following constraints. So let's have a look at the following constraints are commonly used in SQL. The first one is not null. This constraint is used to ensure that a column cannot have a null value. So from its name, when you set this null, or when you created or added this constraint to a certain column in a table, that table cannot accept any null value. So you should add a value in that column. The second constraint is unique, and this constraint ensures that all values in a column are different. So you cannot insert in a certain columns the same value twice. So we cannot put 1 and 1 again, or 2 and 2 again when we apply this constraint, because we need for each column to have a unique value. The third type of constraints here is primary key. Primary key is a combination of a not null and unique that uniquely identifies each row or a record in a table. So as you see here, when we create a primary key in a column, that means we are enforcing two conditions, or a combination of two conditions, not null and unique. So in this case, we cannot leave any null we cannot leave a column in any record without a value, and at the same time when we add a value, this value should be unique. So when we create a primary key, these two conditions, not null and unique, will be attained based on that. And as you learned, a primary key is used to identify each row in a table uniquely. So a primary key is a unique value that cannot be null or cannot be repeated in a certain column. And that's how we can identify a certain row. That's how we can give a specific identity to each row in a table. And as you learned before, the foreign key used to link two tables. You cannot insert a value in a foreign key column unless this value does exist in the primary key column in the other table. So, for example, if you have two tables like department and employee, and let's say department ID is the primary key in the department table, and the department ID also is the foreign key in the employee table. So you cannot put any value in the department ID in the employee table, in this case is the foreign key, without this value being already existing in the primary key. So that's how we can link two tables together. We have here another constraint, which is check. Check ensures that the values in a column meets a certain condition. For example, we can add each value in a certain, we can put check. So by using this value, we can ensure that a certain value. So for example, we can say each value inserted in this column should be greater than 3, or less than 3, or equal, or we can add a formula to meet this condition. So in this case, we can ensure that any value inserted in this column meets our business rules. And this constraint default sets a default value for a column if no value is entered. So let's say we didn't insert any value in that row. There is a default value will be inserted automatically in that cell, in that column, or in that row. And index constraint is used to organize data in a specific order to speed up retrieving these data from the database. And we'll have so this constraint will organize the data in a specific way. Could be if numbers, so if a column, so if the data type in a column is numbers, this index can organize the data based on these numbers from the smallest to the biggest number. And if this column is string, the index will organize it alphabetically, and so on. And we are going to focus on indexes in more details in the following tutorials, because this is quite important in databases, because that's quite important in creating and retrieving data in matters of the speed up of retrieving data.